Hi, everyone. My name is Alexis Marcus. I am part of the admissions team here at MIT Sloan. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon or this morning, wherever you're calling in from, for the MBA Admissions Application Tips webinar to kick off the new evaluation cycle and new admission cycle for the 23-24 year. Really excited to be here and chatting with all of you today and answering any questions that you might have. I am joined by a number of my colleagues in the background who will be answering your Q&A on the back end. So if you do have questions, I would ask that you utilize that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. They'll be answering any of your questions that you have during my session today, and then I will certainly be taking some questions from that bank that are more popular as we're going through it, and some of my colleagues will come on and join us at that point to do some of the live Q&A. So we have a really big agenda. I'm going to go through the entire MBA application process with you and answer any of those questions that you might have and give you a couple tips along the way on what we're looking for in our candidates for the MBA program at MIT Sloan. So the first thing that we'll talk about is, what is an MBA and what is an MBA at MIT Sloan? Then we'll go through the entire application process and then do that Q&A. So the first thing I want to talk about today is the mission of the MIT Sloan School of Management, and it is to develop principled, innovative leaders who improve the world and generate ideas that advance management practice. And I think that you will see that this mission statement is really intertwined and ingrained in everything that we do at MIT Sloan. It's part of who we are, in the admissions process all the way through the curriculum, and then it will hold true as an alum as well. So the first thing to kind of keep in mind when you're thinking about an MBA program or, thinking about an advanced degree is what does it fall, within a larger portfolio of programs. So here at MIT Sloan, we have a number of different programs within our portfolio ranging in different years of experience levels. So the MBA, as you can see on the screen here, really falls within the middle range of the portfolio. And so the folks that are joining our MBA program on average have about 3 to 7 years of work experience. And I say that, but just, add a caveat that is an average. So it's our middle 80th percentile, which means there are certainly people that are falling on either end of this. And so a lot of times people, get nervous and they come to me and they say, oh my goodness, I have 8 years of experience, 9 years of experience, 10 years of experience. Like, is the MBA at MIT Sloan right for me? And it still absolutely can be right for you. It is really up to you to kind of figure out the best program, what you're looking for. So we are going to talk about reasons to pursue an MBA and why an MBA at MIT Sloan might be the right fit for you. So first and foremost, what is an MBA? It really allows you to kind of take a step back from your career. So wherever you have been for, a few years, we are looking for folks with professional work experience and gain some more expertise in that intersection between business and technology. We also want to help you enhance your leadership skills. So it's something that we would imagine that you started thinking about, but how can you bring it to the next level? And then a lot of times people are using the MBA either to advance in their career, move up the ladder within whatever industry or role or function that they're in, or they're looking to kind of make a complete pivot. Often entrepreneurial skills are something that people are looking for to build within an MBA, and you might want to pursue a startup or find a co-founder. Those are all, really strong reasons to think about doing an MBA. One of the biggest reasons, on top of all of that is to really build your professional network. You will get an incredible group, a cohort of students within, your class, your MBA class, but you're also going to be getting access to the entire MIT network. So you'll get lifelong friendships, lifelong professional connections, and it really will span globally because we are an incredibly global school. So we have alumni networks throughout the world, and your classmates themselves will also be, coming from many parts of the world, and you'll have those connections right within the classroom. You'll also have the opportunity while you're at Sloan to really dive into the institute as a whole. You'll have your 1 semester core, which we separate you out into cohorts, which we fondly call oceans or bodies of water. Some of them are rivers. And you are taking all of your classes with that same group of folks throughout your first semester. And then you have elective opportunities, action learning. We have a really big emphasis on hands-on learning. I could go on and on about the curriculum. There's a ton of offerings at MIT Sloan, but these are just some of the reasons why you might think about pursuing an MBA, and for, whether or not, again, it's to advance your career, to make that pivot, expand your network. There's a ton of reasons why people decide that the MBA is the right step for them. Today, we're really going to focus in on whether or not, answering those questions on whether or not you should be applying for the MBA this year, what round you should be doing it in, and we'll go from there. So this is a quick snapshot of the class of 2024. So keep in mind, this is not the folks that are starting in a couple weeks. That class, the finalized numbers are not published just yet, but you should be able to see that online within, I would say, by mid to late September. So if you're curious who's starting this year, you'll definitely be able to see that there. But this gives you a good overview of the rising second years. So the class size was 450 students. And so that does include our LGO students. So LGO, I know I didn't talk about that with the portfolio of programs, but the LGO program is a dual degree. It's an opportunity for folks to get both an MBA as well as an MS in one of the engineering disciplines at the same time. And so we do include those students. They are part of the cohort, your core semester as an MBA student. And so they are included in the class. And the LGOs do start one semester early. So they start in June, and it's a 24-month program as opposed to 2 years with the summers off like the MBA. The LGO really kind of the meat and bones, or the heart of it, is their 6-month internship with one of the partner companies. And so they will do that after their core semesters in LGO and then their core semester within the MBA. So in looking at this, a lot of people might worry, my undergraduate major isn't reflected here, or my pre-MBA industry isn't reflected here. Again, these are just quick snippets of, larger groupings, but there really is a place for everyone within the MBA program at MIT Sloan. And I think that that's something that makes us really unique, is that we have a great diversity of thought, great global diversity within the cohort to really allow for you to have interesting conversations, to learn a lot from your core teams during that core semester. And, it will really advance how you ultimately become a leader in the field. So this is just a quick snapshot to give you a little sense of what the class looks like. So moving into kind of meat and bones of today's session, which is the application. Up here is the application checklist. This is the components for everything that you need to apply for an MBA only. If you are applying for LGO, keep in mind that there is a separate LGO application. There are a couple additional requirements for LGO. Specifically, you need to submit a technical letter, a technical letter of recommendation. You'll also have to submit a statement of purpose for LGO, and you'll need to choose your engineering discipline. For LGO, there's one deadline this year, and that's in November. But for MBA, we are quickly approaching our first deadline, which is going to be September 27th. And then you'll see on the screen that we have 2 deadlines after that. So you might be asking yourself, well, why are there 3 deadlines? What's the advantage? When should I apply? The short answer is you should apply when you're ready. So you want to be putting together a really strong application. You want to be thinking about all of the different components and, whether or not you needed a little additional time to submit a strong letter of recommendation, but also balancing that really closely with, just generally that as we move along in the rounds, less seats are available. So it's really just simple math that at the beginning of round 1, all the seats in the incoming class are available. And then as we kind of approach round 2 and round 3, some of those seats have been committed. People have committed to us. And so, those seats are no longer available. And we are admitting less people as the rounds go on. But again, whether or not you're debating between 1 and 2, we will still be admitting plenty of people through 1 and 2. The third round does tend to be a little bit smaller. So we are going to go through each of these application components today, and I'll answer any questions that you might have about them, and then also give you some tips as we're going through them. I also wanted to give you a quick sense of what the last cycle looked like. How many applications did we receive? How many were invited to interview? And how many ultimately were admitted to join us? And so this slide here gives you a quick overview of that. You can see we had about 4,300 applications last year across all of our rounds, across all 3 rounds. And then we review all of them. So there's no cutoff. A lot of people ask me, what's the minimum GPA or what's the minimum GMAT or GRE score before your cutoff? We have no cutoff. Every single application that is submitted to MIT Sloan is reviewed by the admissions committee. And then about 30% of the applications that we receive are invited to interview, and then about 18% of the overall applicant pool is actually extended an offer to join the MIT Sloan MBA program for the following year. So overall, what are we looking for in the evaluation process? And so there are, a couple things that I think that help identify what we're looking for. And really, we're looking for demonstrated success and then leadership skills. So what does that mean? So demonstrated success, I think of this as, how have you done in your undergraduate classes? If you've already pursued a master's degree, how did you do in that? How are you doing in your professional career? We're really looking for folks to showcase that impact that they've had within their professional realm. And then, we're on the leadership side, we're not looking for you to necessarily already have been a leader in your field. We're looking for you to showcase your traits or characteristics that could build upon those skills to be a successful leader in the business world. So we're looking for examples of how you've worked with others, how you've solved problems, how you've communicated, and really how you've adopted to change within different scopes of your professional world. So those are good questions to kind of ask yourself as you're putting together your application and giving us examples throughout the different components of the application, including the cover letter or your resume or your video, or if you're preparing for our interview. Those are kind of good questions to ask yourself. And what are examples that showcase that within your experiences? All of the applications are evaluated by the admissions committee, which is made up of professionally trained admissions staff. Some of it is staff on our team. Some of them are contractors who have been working with us for a number of years. All of them are professionally trained. There are no current students involved in the application or evaluation process for MIT Sloan. So now kind of jumping into the different components of the application, we'll start first with the cover letter. And I would definitely encourage everyone to go onto the website and read through our how to apply section, which includes all the detailed instructions for all of the different components, or you can just go in and open an application and see the instructions right there in that portal. But for the cover letter, we're really asking you to submit a 300-word or less. It doesn't include the salutation, so don't worry about the address counting towards your word count there, but we're looking for 300 words or less addressed to the admissions committee, and we're looking for you to seek a place in the MIT Sloan MBA program. Within this cover letter, we're really looking for you to give us examples on why you're a good fit for MIT Sloan and why Sloan is a good fit for you. This is your opportunity to think about a few examples and really showcase them. And so, as we're kind of going through this, I want to think about the cover letter, the resume, and the video as your real estate opportunities to showcase, who you are and tell your story in, concise way. Our application is really lean. I know it's incredibly lean compared to other business schools. We are looking for you to think about it in, a smart way and put together all of those materials so you're not being repetitive, but you're really kind of expanding upon what we're asking for within the application. And so the cover letter is really kind of selling yourself. So don't be repeating your resume in paragraph format. We're really looking for you to kind of tell us what are those examples that are exciting to you that you think that have really succeeded. You do not need to focus on your future goals here. This is often a misconception that folks have. We actually purposely don't ask your future goals within the MBA application. And the reason that we don't do that is because we believe that past performance is the best future predictor for performance and success. And so as a result of that, we're looking to see how did you handle situations in the past, and why are these the examples that you're choosing to give us throughout your cover letter. And then also, why MIT Sloan? So, to the extent that you can add in some more details on why Sloan is the right fit for you, we would love to see that. So the next part of the application is the resume. So I just hinted at this. The resume should be limited to 1 page in length. And it's not necessarily, your traditional job application resume. We're really looking for impact related bullets. So we don't need to know the daily tasks that you do at your job or that you have done at your job. We would imagine that, because you're still employed, you check your email on a daily basis. Don't use up real estate there, kind of focusing on those, menial tasks. We really want to know more on the impact, how you've succeeded. Quantifiable accomplishments are in particularly, that's really important to us. We also are looking for an easy to read format. I've heard a lot of things from prospects over the last few months that there have been, recommendations on getting pretty kind of exciting formats. We're not necessarily focused on the format. We want to be able to easily and quickly be able to kind of review the information. We don't want to be searching around or trying to figure out the timeline. We do ask for it to be in reverse chronological order so that your most recent position is on the top. And then we're really looking to see, your education, your work experience, then any additional information that you want to include. So that might include anything that you're doing extracurricularly or volunteer experience. It may also include hobbies. I always like to see, what people are doing outside of their professional realm. So certainly include all of that within the resume to the extent you can. But, you do need to be kind of creative with what needs a description and what does not. So the next part is the video statement. So again, just keeping in mind that these 3 components are the parts that have the most opportunity to put your whole story together. So when you're putting your application together, making sure that these 3 are not repetitive, but maybe kind of complement one another. For instance, your resume, you might be pulling out one example from your resume that you're talking about more in depth on your, on your cover letter. And then on your video, you might be talking about something that you do outside of your professional work that you've mentioned at the bottom of your resume. You may or may not fall that way, but this is just one example of the ways that you can kind of make it a cohesive application when we're thinking about putting together that story. So the video statement is asking you to introduce yourself to your future classmates. I will say, do not worry. This is not going to be shown to your future classmates. It does not go anywhere beyond the admissions committee, but we're really trying to understand, how are you going to be introducing yourself to your future classmates when you walk into the classroom in a few months or in a year from now? So this should be considered your elevator pitch to your future friends. So just a couple tips here. Keep it simple, use your best judgment, and showcase who you really are. So we want you to be uniquely yourself. You do not need a production crew to create this video. I can't stress this enough. We've seen some fantastic videos that are really just you holding up your phone and speaking to it and telling your story, or sitting in front of your camera on your computer and talking directly to the camera. Certainly some people get more creative. They might be outside or doing one of their hobbies. Absolutely, you can do that if you feel comfortable doing that. So then there's nothing worse than seeing a video where someone just looks completely uncomfortable. So make sure that you're really showcasing who you are as an individual. Another kind of quick tip, if you're doing it outside, make sure that we can hear you. I guess this also counts for inside as well. A lot of times, folks will be whispering or there's a truck going by in the background and we absolutely cannot hear what they're saying in the video. So steer clear of that, just making sure that, if you can't hear it when you're playing it back, there's no way that we can. And just be you, be conversational, think about how you would introduce yourself in the future to your future classmates. And that's what the admissions committee really wants to hear within the video statement. Excuse me. So the letter of recommendation for the MBA program, we only require, and not just require, we only accept 1 letter of recommendation. So you really want to think carefully about who's submitting this letter of recommendation for you. I will highlight that this has been a change this year, that we are no longer using the GMAT Common Letter of Recommendation form. So we have moved to our own form, and you can see on the screen here the 3 questions that we're asking the recommender to respond to. You will still put your recommendation, your recommender's contact information into the application. And so One tip that I would say is do this as soon as possible. So your recommendation letter does need to be received by the deadline date in order to consider you as having a full application. So as soon as you know who you're asking your letter of recommendation to be written by, go into the application, navigate to the recommender section, and make sure you put in their name and email. From there, our system will send them an email letting them know that you've put them in for your recommender and giving them the instructions on how to submit their letter and respond to the questions. But again, it's not the GMAC letter of common letter of recommendation form. It is our own form, and they can upload a letter or they can respond within a text box. But make sure you ask them early. Make sure you get their contact information in there so that you can give them ample time to respond, or if there's any issues with them getting the contact or getting the emails from us. We also really like to see a professional email address for that recommender. So making sure that they're adding us as at MIT Sloan to their address book so that we're not going into spam. And we can always help troubleshoot any issues there if they do encounter any. But typically we have no issues. So if there is anything, feel free to ping us or send us an email, and we're happy to walk you through that. But you really want to think about the recommender who knows you best. So we are looking for recommendations from supervisors or managers, certainly someone in the professional setting, and the more recent, the better. I say that with the caveat that we know that many of you are applying without letting your employers know just yet that you're going to be pursuing an MBA and you don't want to risk your career or your employment status. So we certainly understand that. No worries there, and you can absolutely, ask a prior recommender, to write that letter of recommendation for you if need be. All right. We also ask for the contact information for 2 additional references. So similar to your recommender, the references are people that you may have asked for a letter of recommendation from, had they had to be accepted to more. Excuse me one moment. Sorry about that. So we would have, if we had asked you for more letters of recommendation, we would, be reaching out to these people. So you want just contact information, names and email addresses. If we do need to reach out to them at any point during the admissions process, we will send them an email and absolutely find a mutually convenient time where we can connect with them. The other thing to note is that if your if your reference does not speak English, we will employ a translator for that. So you don't need to worry about that. But just know that that we could be reaching out to them at any point in the admissions cycle. So it could be all the way from right after you submit your application through potentially after an interview before a final decision is rendered. So, just make sure that they know what what the timeline looks like, and that we would potentially be asking similar questions to the recommendation letter. All right. The next part of the application is the organizational chart. So this is really just a visualization of where you fall within your org. So we're not looking for you to print out an organization chart from your employer. We really want you to create something on your own. So in other words, we're looking for kind of a snapshot of who you're interacting with on a daily or weekly basis. So who you report into, who you're interacting with within your team or cross collaboratively. If you have any reports that from directly or indirectly, who they are. And then we want you to circle yourself in red so that we can easily pull out who you are. For some people, this might be really straightforward, and we also recognize that certain jobs, this creates a little bit more of confusion. So a good example is if you are a current consultant, you can absolutely pull a recent project that you worked on. And so that can include folks from the client as well as folks from your consulting firm. Let us know who they are. Kind of, if you can include proper names, you can include just titles and who you're interacting with there. To the extent that your recommender or your references are on your organizational chart, you can absolutely highlight them in a different color so we can see that. The other thing that we have noticed folks that have been doing over the past few years, and it has been really nice if you can, but this is definitely not required. If you've progressed within your career at your current organization and you held other roles that are also showcased on that organizational chart, you can somehow showcase that within your organizational chart. So the chart should only be 1 page in length. We're not really looking for anything much lengthier. We should not be using a magnifying glass to find you. I think that's probably the most important. You really want to zoom in on your department, zoom in on who you're working with. So an example might be if you work for Meta, it's unlikely that Mark Zuckerberg is going to be on your actual org chart unless you truly are working directly with him. Otherwise, we're curious kind of what that interaction looks like within your organization or department that's a little bit, more nuanced or smaller. So that's the organizational chart there. Test scores, and this is everyone's favorite section. So we do require the GMAT or a GRE score as part of the application to the MBA program at MIT Sloan. We will accept any of the formats, and so I want to be clear that that includes in-person testing, that includes the online version. It also includes all of the new versions of the GMAT, like the Focus Edition and the new version of the GRE. Any of the versions are completely acceptable. We are familiar with the new scoring mechanisms and what that looks like as compared to the old scoring mechanism. So all of that will definitely be taken into account. So again, don't worry too much there. There are no cutoffs. And then, when you are submitting your application, know that this is really just one component to your application. The rest of the application will really showcase, who you are as an applicant. Lots of questions definitely coming in, I'm sure, about test waivers and whether or not we are granting them again this year as we have in past years. Test waivers are still being offered on a really limited basis, and you will see that the language for test waivers has changed this year than it has in years past. Test waivers are really for folks that are unable to submit a test score. We understand that there are still places in the world that still are not accessing tests at the same rate that they were prior to the pandemic or other issues within their country. And so as a result of this, we do not want to limit them from not being able to submit their test, but certainly that is what the test waiver is intended for. So test waivers are really, you have to explain to the admissions committee why you are unable to submit that test score. Otherwise, it isn't expected that you will be submitting a GMAT or a GRE test score as part of your application. If you are looking to submit that test waiver form, you can go on to the actual application, navigate to the test score section of the application, and there's a link within there to submit it. At this point, we're reviewing those application test waiver requests about once to twice a week, and then you'll receive a decision from us. As the deadline approaches, we'll be reviewing those a little bit more, but just keep in mind that it is a little bit more strict this year, and so it is expected that you will have that test score unless that you have one of those really extreme extenuating circumstances. So with regards to academic records and relevant coursework, so we are looking for your transcripts from all of your undergraduate as well as graduate level coursework. So make sure that you submit that. It can be unofficial at this point. You do not need to have an official transcript at the point of admission. If you are admitted, you will ultimately have to submit that as part of the verification process prior to matriculation. So in addition to uploading your transcripts, which we definitely ask you to make sure that they're legible, a lot of times, again, we get these transcripts that we need magnifying glasses to read them, and we just cannot simply, zoom in enough to read them. So just make sure if you can't read them on your computer screen, we also cannot read them on ours. And then we also are looking for you to tell us a little bit about your coursework in the past. So there are some courses that we're asking you, have you taken this class in the past under the relevant coursework section? I can't stress enough that these are not prerequisites for the MBA. So this should not preclude anyone from feeling like they don't have a place here. We're really trying to understand a little bit more about your quantitative comfort level. And quantitative comfort level can come from a number of different sources, whether it's your undergraduate studies, whether it's your graduate studies, maybe within your professional realm, you've mastered quantitative coursework. Maybe you've done some non-degree coursework that you can put into your application. So it's really an opportunity for you to tell us everything that you've done outside of just, your college or master's programs that you've already done. There's also an optional short answer question where we're asking you to tell us a little bit more about who you are and where you've come from. Again, this is an optional question. There is no negative inference if you don't respond to us, but it's definitely an opportunity to expand upon your background. Just keep in mind that this is not an opportunity to tell us, why you didn't do well in a class or give us other information. We do have spots on the application that ask specifically for that. So if there's, some discrepancy in your academic transcript, there's a spot for that. If you've had any student misconduct that you need to tell us about, there's a spot for that. So the optional short answer question really should be limited to responding to the prompt to talk about your background. Again, you may have already discussed this in other parts of your application and you don't want to expand upon it more, but if you do want this space, it's there for you. It is limited to words only. So we're not looking for external links or videos, or we're certainly not looking for going out to your YouTube channel. So just kind of keep in mind that we will be limiting our review to what you're putting in writing within the optional short answer question. So if you are successful within the first step of the admissions process, meaning that you've been reviewed and then you're invited to an interview, just a couple things to note that the interviews will be virtual. They'll be 30 minutes with a member of our admissions committee. So again, I'm saying again that they will be virtual interviews conducted on Zoom, and they'll be behavioral based questions. So we'll be asking you for more examples on how you've handled situations in the past. And we're looking for specific examples. So as you're putting together your application, I definitely recommend kind of coming up with a bank or, jotting down some notes of different examples that you would like to showcase, picking out some that you're going to put within your application, and then additional ones that you would like to discuss during your interview. And so that will be a good way to kind of think about those examples and which ones you should put forth at different parts within the admissions process. Before every interview, we will ask the interviewee to submit 2 short answer questions, and we will send you those prompts at the time that you're invited to interview. So we're not going to cover those today, but just keep in mind that that will be something that you will need to do if you are invited to interview. So how are the applicants evaluated? So I think that I mentioned earlier, there's kind of 2 buckets here. So there's demonstrated success, which I said is kind of your professional accomplishments, your undergraduate and any graduate coursework that you have done, and then you have your personal leadership attributes. And so, we're MIT Sloan, so all of these decisions are really data driven. And so at the reading phase, when we read your application, we're scoring you on those different kind of characteristics and competencies. And so from there, we plot everyone out on this XY axis, and you can see that this group right here is the group that moves forward within the admissions process. So if your scoring falls within this quadrant up here, you will move forward and get invited to an interview. And so you saw earlier on in my slides, that's about 30-ish% of the overall applicant pool that will move on. Again, we will do this exact same thing with scoring on the same competencies that we discussed before, the demonstrated success and those personal leadership attributes. And we will, chart it out again after an interview. And then those are the folks that we invite to we ultimately admit to the program, which is about 18% of our overall applicant pool. So a couple quick admissions tips before we move on to Q&A. So we're really looking for reasons to admit you. And so I think that remembering that we're your advocates and we're here to, try to help you and gather all the data that we need to admit you. So when I'm telling you to think about, what are the different examples that you've had within your professional career that you want to showcase, thinking about that and putting together the best examples that tell us that exact thing. We want you to be yourself and follow the directions. So following instructions, I would say, is probably one of the biggest tips I can give you. We've been really mindful about putting together the application and the instructions. And so if we're asking for something in a certain way, there's a reason for it. And so making sure that you do that so that, you can kind of showcase your overall the skills that you are able to follow those instructions within the application. That's definitely step one there. And then applying early. Again, this is going back to that balancing act of whether or not your application is ready for submission. You've gotten everything together. Your recommendation letter will be on time. All of your materials do need to be received by the deadline. I will say that when we say apply early, we're talking about the rounds rather than applying earlier than the deadline. So for instance, the first deadline is September 27th. We will not start looking at applications until after 3 p.m. on September 27th. So even if you apply today, your application will just be sitting there until September 27th. But applying early really just means, if you're thinking about it today, don't wait till round 3 to submit the application. All right. So I know I see tons of questions within the Q&A. And so I don't know if one of my colleagues wants to come off and read some of the questions or some things. I can pull up the Q&A here too of things that are going questions. Catherine, thank you.
Hi, yes, we have a bunch of questions. Some of them are around reapplicants and how they can share some more information and help them still stand out this time. So we'd love to hear a little more around that.
Yeah, great question. So reapplicants do have kind of a benefit here, right? They have 2 areas or 2 full applications that are going to be reviewed. So if you applied last year and you were unsuccessful, the admissions committee will review the entire application from last year as well as the application from this year. So we don't have a traditional reapplicant essay. I get that question a lot. There is a small section under the additional questions section that's asking us for kind of a highlight of what's changed since you last applied. And so certainly you can give, some high level bullets there, but we will be able to see your application from last year and review it. And so this is really your opportunity to submit additional material. So make sure you're giving an updated resume, make sure you're getting an updated letter of recommendation. So even if your recommender itself is the same, perhaps that recommender can talk a little bit more about what you've been up to since last applying. I know folks that applied in round 3 and now we're applying in round 1 might say it's only been a few months. Maybe ask for someone else for a letter of recommendation in that sense. Update your video. All of these are reasons, that you have more real estate to tell us who you are and why you're a good fit for MIT Sloan. So make sure you take advantage of it.
Great, thank you. And to tack onto that question, a few people attending today are MBA early reapplicants, I guess. So how do we approach that? Are they considered a reapplicant? So
MBA early applicants who were not successful in getting into the MBA early program, which is for our deferred admissions for college seniors, are not considered reapplicants. So I think that that's really important. We're not going to go back and look at your MBA early file from, presumably, somewhere between 2 and 5 years ago when you were a college senior. So, this is a new application for you. And I will tell you that I saw so many successful MBA applicants this year that were previously rejected from MBA early just because we didn't have enough data points on them. So know that that is definitely very common and you are not considered a reapplicant.
Great, thank you. One question about the organizational chart. I know you touched on that, but there's been a couple of questions. If someone has multiple companies, say they're an entrepreneur, do they need to share more than one organizational chart, or how do they share that information?
It really should be your primary job. So on the application, we're asking you, what is your primary employment? So you might have a startup on the side, but you have another job. And so it really should be your primary job. But let's say that you're doing a couple different things, or you are a solo entrepreneur. What does the org chart look like then? You can certainly submit your org chart if you are a solo entrepreneur. Just tell us kind of who you're interacting with. Obviously, there's clients, there's customers, there's a board of directors. Maybe you're working closely, with some VCs. Depending on the startup, kind of the stage that it's at. Tell us who's involved besides you so we can understand what those daily interactions look like.
Thank you. Looking through here. If again, another reapplicant question, but on the interview side, what should they do differently for that piece?
Oh, I mean, I guess it depends. And it's some self-reflection on whether or not the interview, if you had an interview last year, was it successful? What didn't go well? We do not give feedback on any part of the admissions process. So it's really an opportunity for you to have some self-reflection on whether or not there was something that didn't go well and if you can improve upon it. But, thinking about different examples, I would say, the more recent, the better, for example, is across the board for everyone, not just reapplicants. And so certainly thinking about what else you can showcase within that interview.
Thank you. And then another person's, a few people have had questions on the cover letter, what they should focus on, how they should approach it. If you could share a little there.
Yeah, it depends on, what you're hoping to showcase as your successes. So when you're putting together your resume, and you're really focusing in on those impact bullets, the quantifiable successes that you've had within your employment, think about the ones that really make you tick, that make you really excited, the drive, and why that's kind of leading you to come to MIT Sloan, or what excites you about MIT Sloan that is transferable to what you've been working on, and why you want to do this degree. And so I would say those are the examples to be pulling out and expanding upon. You're going to just have one simple kind of sentence or two on the resume, but you have a little bit more real estate to be talking about details on the cover letter. I often get a question of whether or not they should focus on one example or multiple examples. It, again, depends on your situation. Sometimes we've seen, one example being kind of like the thread that puts together an entire application. It drives that person. It's the why for everything. And so it makes sense for that person. But then other folks, there's lots of things that they are going to pursue or get involved with when they are pursuing an MBA. And so then we might want to see a few more examples from that person to understand, like, why is this the right fit for them?
Great, thank you. And then a simple question around email submission for letters of recommenders who are submitting letters of recommendation. If they're in between jobs or perhaps recently left the company, is it fine for people to submit a personal email?
So we really are looking for a professional letter, or excuse me, a professional email address for the letter of recommendation. I guess if in that off chance that the person does not have a professional letter of recommendation, or excuse me, I keep saying that, professional email at the time that they're submitting the letter of recommendation, sure, but just know that we are going to ask a little bit more, look at that a little bit more closely at the application, wondering kind of what's going on here. So we will need a little bit more detail on that.
Thanks. And I've had a couple of questions around one of our dual degree offerings with the Harvard Kennedy School. What's the process for applying to both of these programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to be super clear, this year is the final year where first year HKS students can apply to MIT Sloan. If you are thinking about doing a dual degree, you are strongly encouraged to apply concurrently to both programs this year. After this year, you will have to apply concurrently. So we're getting rid of really that like midstream cycle. So similarly, this is the last year that current Sloanies will be able to apply to HKS. And so if you are currently at Harvard and thinking about it, now's the time, but don't plan on doing that in a future year. If you want to do a dual degree with HKS, why don't you go ahead and get that done concurrently this year?
Thanks. And I know a couple people have asked this, so I figured we address it. If someone has, support from an MIT affiliate or alum that they'd like to share with us, how can they do that if they're not a letter or recommender for them?
Yeah, so the recommendation really should be utilized only for folks that know you kind of in a professional capacity in a managerial function. So, certainly if that happens to be an MIT Sloan alum, great. We would love to hear from that person, but definitely don't submit that letter of recommendation from, alum if they don't know you in that capacity in a professional work sense. Alums are often sending us letters of support of different candidates, and they can continue to do so. They can send that just to the general email address, like the one on the screen, and we can add it to your file.
All right, just going through to see some of the other questions. I think you touched on a good bit, but
Kind of scroll too. I do see a question here about the letter of recommendation, the new form. So we are moving away from the GMAC common letter of recommendation. It is not as robust as the GMAC common letter of recommendation. There are some basic questions that we're asking the recommender to score you on. And then we're asking those 3 questions that I had on the screen earlier, and you can see within the instructions page to answer, and they can answer that either in a text box or by uploading a letter. So it's their preference, but it's definitely a little bit shorter than that GMAC common letter of recommendation form.
One individual had a question of if they're laid off during their application process, how can they handle the org chart?
Yeah, so your most recent position. So again, we understand kind of the economy right now. There's lots of people that have recently been laid off, or maybe know that it's coming down the pipeline. That's definitely not a negative thing towards your application at all. We're certainly going to want to know, what you're doing now, or kind of how you're spending your time. But with regards to the org chart, just give us your most recent position.
And if there's areas maybe of concern for the applicant, maybe around a weaker GPA or something like that, and they'd like to share a little more around that story, is there an area, an opportunity in the application for that?
There's an area in almost every section of the application to give us a little bit more detail if something isn't really kind of clear, with a quick review of that. So under the academic section, if there's something that you want to expand upon, there's a section there. Again, there's also a section if you had any misconduct or any issues in undergraduate. We understand that was a long time ago. Lots of things have happened or changed. We just ask you to expand upon it a little bit more, so we're not left wondering when we review transcripts or things like that. But yes, there are plenty of opportunities to expand upon that. A lot of questions I see from international students about their transcripts, whether or not they need to give translations. Okay, so I'll answer a couple questions. Translations. If your transcript is not in English, you will need to get a certified English translation of it and upload that with the unofficial copy of the transcript. You do not need to get a WES evaluation for your transcript. You do not need to change over your grading system. We are asking you to put in your GPA exactly how it appears on your transcript. We are very well versed in a number of different international grading systems, and so we can definitely look at it in the grading system in your country. Do not translate it or do not convert it to any sort of scale. Leave it as is. All right. I see some questions for folks that are planning to apply to the early admissions process, which is for the deferred program for college seniors. So that deadline is until April, and we will be having an application tips webinar for that population specifically to talk about the nuances with their application. This is really intended for MBA applicants or LGO applicants planning to apply this fall and starting in June 2024 for LGO or September 2024 for MBA.
You may have covered this, but is the average years of work experience the same for the LGO program as for the MBA?
It is. So, I mean, the average year for both is 5 years, but the span typically ends up being 3 to 7. LGO really wants to see a minimum of 3 years before applying to the LGO program. So the LGO class is much smaller. It's about 50 students as opposed to, 160 for the MBA. Sorry, 360 for the MBA. Don't mean to scare anyone. Let me just clarify that again. So it's 360 students for the MBA class and then 50 students for the LGO class. All right, just scrolling through these questions. Lots answered by my colleagues, so thank you to them. For folks that don't have GPAs or don't have, scores at the time of the deadline, for your GMAT or your GRE, you definitely need to get that submitted as soon as possible. If we see an application that doesn't have one of the components, we will start reviewing it as is if it's not received by the deadline date. So that is the same for if you're missing a test score, if you're missing a letter of recommendation, it's going to be reviewed as is. So, making sure that you meet all of that get all of that submitted on time. And there is an application portal where you can see what's been submitted and what's still outstanding. For folks that are currently in grad school and they're still waiting on some grades for the round one, you can just put in, you can upload your unofficial transcript that just shows the classes that you're taking in the fall. That's totally fine.
One question too that's come up a number of times is, can someone apply to multiple programs if they are interested in Sloan Fellows or they're interested in Master's of Business Analytics?
Yeah, great question. So if you are applying for MBA and LGO, you cannot do that. So an LGO applicant is automatically considered for MBA. So if you apply in the LGO round, you will be looked at by the engineering discipline that you're applying for, as well as us in the Sloan admissions office, and you'll get a decision on the MBA side of things and or whether or not you're successful on the engineering side of things. So you can't apply for LGO and MBA. We will bounce the MBA one back to you. But certainly if you're interested in Sloan Fellows and then you want to put your name in the hat for both Sloan Fellows and MBA, you can definitely apply to both programs. It is the only way to guarantee that you will be considered for both programs. And certainly if you're thinking about, a Master's of Finance or business analytics program, you can apply to both of those as well. So someone asked, sorry, I was just gonna say, someone asked, can an additional recommender be a mentee or previous employee? So there are no additional recommendations. There's one letter of recommendation for the MBA program, and we are looking for that to be someone that has known you in a professional capacity, preferably in a managerial or supervisory role. Your additional reference names and contact information could be a previous employee. I would steer clear maybe of the mentee. We're really looking for folks that have known you in a supervisory capacity.
Could they be an additional reference though?
Yes. So no, so I'm sorry. So I was saying it's same with the additional references. We're really looking for folks that are the supervisory capacities. It's the same, like exactly who you would ask for a recommendation letter.
Thank you for clarifying that. One question I did have come up is around the new GMAT and the IR section and how the different focuses are. How are we approaching that when we review them?
Yeah, so the scoring mechanisms for the focus edition is different than it was for the old version. And so we are well versed in that. We have met with GMAC on a number of occasions and we understand the different scoring mechanisms, how the different sections are reviewed. So, you should still put in your score exactly as you received it, and we will know which test you took and kind of what those equivalents look like.
Some folks are asking too if we accept the EA score for the MBA.
We do not. The EA is not accepted for MBA. It is only accepted for Sloan Fellows. And so you will need the GMAT or the GRE score.
And I will share too, we got a number of questions around having an English proficiency exam, and we don't require that for this application.
Yep, exactly. We actually don't require it for any of our programs. So we do all of our, English comprehension and proficiency is through the interview process. All right.
I think we covered a lot of these.
A lot of org chart questions. Definitely recommend going on the FAQs page within our website. We have some examples there to kind of showcase. Someone said that they used a red arrow instead of a red circle. It's totally fine. We'll be able to see you. If you're in a rotational program, again, on the org chart, you can certainly do your most recent rotation and kind of showcase that. If there's a way to showcase multiple roles that you've held, certainly do that, but we still want to kind of limit it to that one page. We don't need an org chart for each rotation that you did. Again, this will also be recorded and posted, I think, to our YouTube channel. Is that correct, Catherine? Okay, great. So you can go back and review it. It does look like we've responded to a lot of these. Any final questions or things from our team that we want to make sure we make note of? All right. Well, this has been a great session. I'm looking forward to getting applications from everyone on here. If we can be of any help at all, the email address is on the screen here, so feel free to reach out to us. Again, round 1 deadline is September 27th, so it is coming up. And we'll have a number of recruitment events, so continue to check back on our website. We'll also be kind of launching our class visit program towards the end of September, and so there'll be information about that if you want to come to campus and visit us, sit in on a class, learn a little bit more about the teaching styles at MIT Sloan. Just be sure you're checking our website and you'll see all of that there. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, and it was a pleasure to join you today and be able to give you these different tips. Have a great day.